Well, there it is, Witty here, working out what class I should play, perhaps even you should play, or anyone should play in Shadowlands. So I have my classes in the order that I prefer them. Bottom being at the bottom, where we have Paladin, and I'll explain this in a moment, but my thoughts and processes going into Shadowlands is that I'm a single solo player, generally speaking, looking forward to Torghast more than anything else, then Mythic plus Dungeons, then Raiding, then PvP. So that's the order, the preferential. I like to do outdoor sort of questing as well, so that impacts on how I would enjoy a class. Quick, meaty, beasty, impactful abilities to quickly kill mobs makes me prefer classes more over others that are about higher damage rotations and, you know, longer cooldowns. Anyway, so with all of that explained, we're going to go over essentially each class, their specs, the scores I gave them and the reasons why, as quickly as I possibly can. So Paladin at the bottom. Holy, just not a big fan of it. I feel it's a bit clunky. It's a little bit restrictive in terms of your healing capabilities. You're kind of forced down one road with it, and I just not a big fan of the Holy. So Retribution, actually Protection, 4.5 out of 5. It's actually quite fun to play. Not that many abilities, but they do have their impacts where it counts. There's the issue though that it's a little bit basic because of that, but it's fun. I do like it. However, the downtime is a real big issue for me. There are like these 2 to 3 second downtime moments where you're just auto attacking like in Classic, and it feels like you need something else to press. Retribution, it's basically a worse version of Protection. I think it could be great if the downtime wasn't the issue, because with Protection the downtime isn't as annoying because you're tanking, but as a DPS you want to always be doing something. So it has an almost good rotation, but there's downtime moments that just kill the pace in general for Retribution. The build-ups are interesting, the spends on the Holy Power, but it just lacks that oomph to keep the smoothness and the pace moving. I'm going to move on to Druid now. Bear in mind that also take into account that these classes and specs are rated on their abilities that are available, and generally speaking the amount of abilities I like to have, as well as hotkeyed, I don't tend to like long cooldown abilities, so I will always mark down classes that have those. You might be different. You might love Death Knight, for example, because you just love having 17 abilities that have 2 to 3 minute cooldowns, but personally I like quick punchy cooldowns that I can rotate frequently. It's my personal opinion. Everyone plays differently. This is just how I see the game, how I play the game. Druid Moonkin could be more complex. Feels a bit forced though. 4 out of 5. It's good for what it does, but it's a little bit counterintuitive in the sense that you're sort of almost using the wrong spell 2 times to proc the alignment that you need to get to start doing the spell that you want to do. And you're kind of forced into a rotation with the 15-second Celestial alignment kicking off. Star Surge is cool. Could be nice if it was off global cooldown to make it a bit more punchy. It's nice that you got Moonfire and Starfire to sort of like spam and control mobs and sort of spread them out. So good aggro abilities. Very good for out in the world. A little bit slow and static otherwise. Restoration. Lots of AoE healing options, but their single target sucks. Like Swift Mend is on a 15-second cooldown. It's the only one that doesn't sort of like actually have an additional effect like heal over time after the initial heal. So you can use regrowth to heal, but it's also got that heal over time and you're kind of wasting it. I don't like that kind of feeling. I like to have just a proper heal that I can spam, like Flash of Light or, you know, a bigger Holy Light, whatever. But Restoration's okay. It's probably really good for people that like to heal big packs of people in raids, but otherwise not as keen on it. Guardian, it's a worse warrior basically, but it has better spammable AoE options because you can use them all the time. So if you've got lots of mobs running around, you can spam, you swipe, your thrash and stuff like that more frequently, easily. So probably good for dungeon running, but anything more complicated than that, and I think Guardian Druid kind of falls flat because it's got single target abilities, but it doesn't feel like its mitigation or single target is anywhere near as interesting or as cool as the warriors. So if you was planning on playing tank, just play a warrior over a Guardian Druid. Feral gets the job done. Simple though, can be good. The Blood Talon's complexity is interesting. It basically is like 4 seconds. You got to use 3 different abilities, and then you get this buff. But it feels like that is too punishing and too painful to maintain. Like, I prefer buffs that are sort of like 10 to 15 seconds along those lines, that give you that kind of flexibility to breathe, just in case at the moment you need to run or you go back to fighting the boss. There's mechanics obviously in raids and dungeons, so you might not always be able to keep the blood talons up as much as you should be able to if you was just hitting the target dummy. Stealth is always a big plus for Feral out in the world. Easy, flexible, but their damage rotation is kind of dull. Like, there's really not much to it, so you're going to get bored, I think, if you're on single target as Feral. Probably better if they have like jobs to do. So yeah, it's okay. Run by the numbers. Moving on to Warlock. So let's start off with Destruction. Not that many abilities, but the rotation is actually solid and fun, if a bit basic. So it might get better with gear. AoE is a bit clunky though. I felt like I needed more shards a lot of the time to really proc off AoE, because 3 shards for the Rain of Fire is a bit painful. But if you're concentrating on like solidly maintaining the haste from the conflagrate and then spending on the big chaos bolts when you get the shards, as well as you know, maintaining havoc when you can, when there's more than one target, it becomes more interesting. But single target, it's good. It's good. It's 4 out of 5, but there's something that's not quite there. Either it needs like one more ability, or it just needs a faster shard rotation for it to be really up there for me. Demonology, I absolutely loathe it. I can't get my head around Demonology. If you like Demonology, fantastic for you. I honestly just cannot work it out. Bear in mind that these are my experiences of leveling up all of the classes to max level and playing them a little bit in dungeons. So I haven't really given all of these specs or all of these classes, you know, the due diligence that they deserve necessarily. But these are my more or less first/review impressions of like at least a few hours spent on each. So yeah, they just feel clunky. Demonology, clunky, funky, clunky. I don't like it. Affliction does the job. Rotation keeps you busy. More targets equals more skill. However, the things that I don't like about that is these days mobs don't really last that long, so I don't think there's that much reward for Affliction, where you're trying to put up 18-second dots when the mobs are going to die in 5 seconds. You can try to obviously maintain a bunch of these dots, and then you can reward yourself with Malefic, which does damage to all the targets that have dots. But if, say for example, you're spending the time to dot up like 4 targets with like 3 sets of dots each, and then by the time you get to do like Malefic, 2 of those targets have died, because that's what the people do in your dungeon. They pick off the mobs. It's got to feel really pretty punishing, to be honest. I just don't like it as much as I used to like it, because I think Affliction just played better back in the day, because mobs used to be harder to kill. It's kind of the same as it used to be, but it just doesn't feel as good now with retail. Now we're going to move on to the Hunter. So, survival. Actually, let's do Beastmaster. So, mega easy. If you lack procs, it feels sluggish though. Barbed shot dependence kind of sucks, because it feels like the regeneration on your focus isn't quite there, even though Barb Shot is there to give the focus regeneration. It feels like the longer the fight goes on, the more you're going to slowly run out of energy, to the point where you're having those 2 to 3 second moments where you're not doing anything, waiting for that focus to regenerate. That could get better with gear, but I don't know. What role do I want to play? That's also another important part. DPS, then tank, then heal. But really, the tank and heal are like way behind the DPS. I'm more interested in just doing pure DPS. I would only tank or heal if I just wanted to get through dungeons quickly or enter a raid, basically. So DPS is my focus. Yeah, I mean, Beastmaster, the real big plus of Beastmaster is that you can, I think, use all of their abilities whilst moving. So it's what I really used to like about Hunter back in the day. I just don't like Beastmaster that much. I actually prefer Marksmanship. Personally, even though they've got the same score. I think the thing is Beastmaster got a slightly higher score because it's able to do its bits on the move. So if you like moving whilst attacking, it's fantastic for out in the world, moving to the next target, killing up to 12 mobs, and then handing your quest or raid mechanics. But Marksmanship is a lot more static, but there feels like there's a good reward to making sure that you maintain a steady shot. Haste buff, as well as spending your arcane shots and then doing your aim shot. It's pretty simple though. There's not really much to it. If there was a little bit more focus regeneration and another ability to perhaps throw into the mix, it might be just a little bit higher. It's got those rapid fire abilities, but you know, you can reduce the cooldown on that. There's kind of some interesting stuff there, but it's slower. It could be quicker. If you like standing still and doing big damage, I think Marksmanship is good for you. Survival, Blizzard tried to make it work as best as it could. Just seemed easy but unrewarding. It's not that bad. If you're determined to play melee, just play any other melee class, pretty much, though. However, if you wanted to be a hunter, so that you can do Marksmanship or Beastmaster, but then dip into melee, then you actually won't be that disappointed with Survival. It's just not that great. They've got, like, their cooldowns, 2 charges on certain abilities, so you can maintain and always keep it underneath the 2 charge mark. Big hits, big spend, bit of focus regen, but there's not really much reason to play Survival Hunter, honestly, if you're playing melee. Next we have Demon Hunter. So Vengeance, I really didn't like the tanking of this. I thought I was going to potentially like it, but then I got more scared of it over time. So apart from the double heroic leaps, which are fantastic, because heroic leap, or whatever its jump is called, it's really short cooldown. You can get a talent that reduces it down to like 12 seconds or whatever, and you got 2 charges of it. That is like the only really good thing about it. Otherwise, it's kind of got a rotation, a mechanic that makes it dependent upon nearby soul shards. Well, souls. So those are souls that you get from attacking mobs or killing mobs, and you kind of need to wait for those and feel like you've got 5 of those before you can use an ability. I don't like stuff that you have to wait on before you can use an ability that's like a dependency. I hate that kind of stuff. And also it's got delayed effects on its spells. Like you can actually reduce the cooldown with talents, but generally speaking it's like this kind of, you will silence any targets after 2 seconds after casting. And it's like, but why not just silence them when I actually press the button? Like, it just feels bleh. Havoc, ridiculously easy rotation. I actually played Hunter for the most in BFA, and I haven't played much of BFA. I've only really come back the last couple of months. This is basically the best class for people with jobs, families, not much time for WoW. They literally just log in, they do their dailies, they want something fast, mobile, they don't want to think about it too much, turn their brain off, just smash some buttons and kill some things. Because that's Demon Hunter in a nutshell. It's basically Builder, number 2, Demon's Bite, whatever, Spender, whatever the third ability is called. You just spend, and then you use Blade Dance on cooldown, you use Eye-Beam on cooldown, and Immolation Aura on cooldown. There's literally nothing else to it. It is incredibly simple. Too simple. I cannot play this class and be satisfied. It's only satisfying because of the mobility. If you didn't have mobility, my goodness, this class would be trash. So the thing that makes it more interesting is obviously the mobility in terms of the Fel Rush, the ability to glide when you're falling, that's obviously a big plus. The potential of double jump and fault abuse, manipulating onto terrain that you shouldn't necessarily be able to access, especially for going back to old dungeons, makes it kind of enticing, but not enticing enough to have to put up with the rotation that just doesn't give really any satisfaction. Death Knight is next. So we have Frost. Wait, Blood. I got that as dog shit. I really didn't give dog shit much of a go. Did I say dog shit? I'm reading Death Knight, distracting me. Blood. Just don't like it. It's by far the worst tanking spec. I used to love it, and this is coming from someone that used to play Blood Death Knight almost as a main in Wrath of the Lich King alongside my Druid. And I did it in Mr. Pandaria as well. I played Blood Death Knight. Really freaking strong. I just don't like what they've done with it. The general consensus I have with Death Knight overall is the rune regeneration. It never feels like you have enough runes, or they're coming up so slowly that it just feels like you're always waiting. They don't regenerate quickly enough. Maybe that gets better with gear, but I really don't like them. There's not much to say. Death Knight also has way too many long cooldowns. So we're just going to move on to Unholy. I used to have this ranked higher because it's got a higher level of complexity, but I don't think that makes up for the fact that it's just basically a cooldown management game with your pets and your Apocalypse and your 1.5 minute and your 1.3 minute cooldown abilities, making sure that those proc. It's the rune regeneration. Feels a bit too slow. And I just don't feel like it vibes very well when you're doing like old dungeons. You're just trying to pull as many mobs as possible, and you can't actually pull with Outbreak because you've used all of your Outbreak runes, which take 1 rune each, and then you're just kind of staring at the mob waiting for it to come to you. I want to like it more than I do, basically. That's it. Frost, I didn't initially like it that much, but it's actually not that bad. If you like procs, this is probably the class for you. It's like a melee Frost mage or something along those lines. You know, you're getting active abilities, flare up, you hit the button, it does the job. It's pretty simple rotation. It's a more fun version of Paladin, really, I think. Not far off it, though, in terms of the slow, clunky feel, but yeah. Death Knight used to be higher, but I think after revisiting it at level 50, I just wasn't impressed as I was initially. So Priest, Holy, easy mode, has everything you can need, all options are accounted for, but I did dislike the dependency of spamming spells to reduce the cooldown of Holy Word. I hate the Holy Word. I know it's a 1-minute cooldown, you can reduce it by a large amount by spamming heals, but I feel like that's somewhat counterintuitive to like the classic gameplay that I prefer. I know this is retail, but I prefer this sort of like, when it comes to healing at least, like when it comes to DPS I prefer to spam, but when it comes to healing I prefer to be more mentally aware of how much mana I'm spending and what I'm doing, and it just feels like trash when you just got to actively spend on like heals that you know aren't even healing the target because they're at maximum health just to get your chastise or your next Holy Word ready. It's got everything though. It's got quick heal, long heal, heal over time, shield, AoE, long heal but does big heal, quick AoE heal, Holy Nova, even quicker heal for AoE and groups of mobs, and you can also do a little bit of damage whilst you're doing it. Like, there's really, you can't go wrong with Holy Priest if you're looking for a healer. Discipline, I think I could potentially put that at a higher score. It's 3 out of 5 at the moment, but I haven't had enough time to really experience the class. It's got the description of trash, but it's actually, I'm joking really, because that's from when I first started playing in it and I had a hard time. But I think if I gave myself many hours to learn Discipline properly, I could probably really enjoy the aspect of doing damage to heal other people. But for someone that was coming back into the game and is pretty new to retail, or you know, hasn't played it for a long time and is trying to get a grasp of all the classes, I just didn't get behind it that much. I didn't like the fact that I had to interrupt my sort of DPS rotation to get certain heals off or atonements not lasting quite long enough, because it's dependent on atonements. If atonements lasted just a few seconds, I know you can get talents for it, but if they lasted just a few seconds longer, I'd feel more comfortable about DPS and that bit longer before throwing the next heal and interrupting my DPS. Because the DPS is part of your heal, but sometimes you need to interrupt that part of your heal because it's not going to be enough to heal the target to keep them alive, so you have to interrupt to do some proper healing and then go back to the DPS / healing. It's interesting, but I couldn't quite get it. Shadow, I think this is just a really good spec, and even though DPS is like damage over time a lot of the time with Shadow Priest, it's surprisingly effective out in the world. When I was leveling, I was moving from mob to mob, killing them quickly, but it didn't actually bother me. I wasn't like, my Shadow Word Pain isn't lasting long, it's lasting too long and I'm not getting much value, because you have things like Shadow Word Death, which is like an execute ability, and you can sort of manipulate that for single target or damage on mobs out in the world. And the Void Eruption, there's a really cool PvP talent, although the downside is you have to have PvP activated, and that's probably harder to do at level 15 than it is when you're leveling up, or rather max level. But every time you get hit by a mob, it reduces Void Eruptions, so then you can use Void Eruptions so much more out in the world, and it's a really cool sort of alternative to the rotation that you already have, because it's just more stuff to do on top of that rotation, which is where the Shadow Priest doesn't get the highest score it could get, because when you don't have the Void Eruption available, your rotation doesn't feel like it's quite enough. You got your Mind Blast, you use that, you got your Vampiric Embrace, or you know, that doing damage over time, Shadow Word Pain, and then you do Mind Flay in between. It's okay, but it's so much better when you can use those Void Bolts as well in between. So when you don't have it, you notice it, if that makes sense. Shaman. Now, Shaman is notoriously one of my least favorite classes of all time over the last well, how long? 15 years? 16 years World of Warcraft's been going for. But retail Shaman's really good, generally speaking. Let's do enhancement first, because it's really the one that has like nothing going for it. It is just by the numbers, it's okay. It's a DPS rotation, nothing particularly special, no particular filler. Although their filler is kind of lightning bolt, but that's contradictory because it's got like a cast time. Albeit it is short, the cast time, it's still a cast time, which feels odd when you're using mostly instant abilities as a melee kind of enhancement shaman. So I didn't like that aspect of it. It's fine. It's okay. You won't be too disappointed by enhancement. I don't think you're going to be blown away by it either. Elemental. 4.5 out of 5. This is actually a big deal. Elemental's really, really good. However, I feel like it's going to get a lot better with gear. Because I really like the Lava Surge ability. And I take the talent that gives me 2 of those so I can use those more frequently. But it's when I can't use those, or I haven't built up enough Maelstrom to use my Earth Shock, I'm then kind of forced to clunkily use the other elements, which are like Frost Shock and Lightning. They don't feel as impactful and as fun to use as the Lava Surge. So you're having these moments where you're going, oh, Lava Surge, Lava Surge. Oh, I've built up a big enough amount of Maelstrom to do some big damage. So I'm going to use my 45-second cooldown that doubles up on my Earth Shock or my Earthquake if there's a bunch of mobs. And then another Lava Surge again. And then, oh, I've got to do this Frost Shock and Lightning Bolt whilst I wait for Lava Surge to be available again. It's really good, though. And I think it could get better with gear. Restoration. I was really impressed with Restoration. It's basically like Priest in a way, without the annoying holy words. You get lots of healing options. You're almost spoilt for choice. You get so much. There's what? Chain Heal, Healing Wave, Single Target Heal, Earth Shield, Heal over time. Oh, thanks. What the hell was that all about? Has that been 30? It couldn't have been 30 minutes already. Anyway. that was a bit rude, wasn't it? So yeah, basically, Restoration Shaman has so much going for it. It's crazy. I will put actually all of this information in the video description below when I put this up onto the YouTube. But damn, so many abilities. Really good job from Blizzard. It's basically maybe a worse Holy Priest. It really depends on how you look at it. Like, Holy Priest possibly has better like heals, but they're kind of the same thing. It's just Holy Priest might be a little bit more flexible in terms of its movement capabilities and on-the-go healing. So, with that said, we can move on to Mage. If you're looking for a ranged DPS, Mage, you can't really go too far wrong. They didn't get the highest scores, but damn, Frost is good. It's not very complex, feels sluggish without procs, but flows great otherwise. Not much to say. It does the job well, but kind of boring. So out in the world, Frost is great. Does tons of AoE damage. You get the procs, it feels like more often than you do when you're fighting against a single target dummy or a boss. So out in the world, I feel like you kill things quickly enough that the procs proc and they do what they do and the mobs die, so you feel satisfied. When you're fighting against a single target dummy or boss and it lasts a lot longer, there are these moments where you just don't get the procs and then you're basically just spamming Frostbolt. It's like classic Frost Mage, and then that's when you notice it. That's when it hits your brain and it's like, this ain't that fun. But then a proc comes up and suddenly you're like, oh, okay, it's fun again. And then when the proc goes away, it's like, So it's kind of like the Void Eruption thing for Priest. It's not as fun as it could be unless you've got Void Eruption available. Fire. I wanted to like Fire more, but it's basically a worst Frost Mage as far as I can tell. Like, Frost Mage has basically stolen Fire with the Ice Lance, you know, like the Pyroblast procs. You got your Ice Lance or you got your Ice Flurry. It's basically Fire. It does Fire better than Fire does, I think, Frost. If that makes strange sense. It's just better. Like, what? I can't see a reason to play Fire other than Frost. You know, unless you want to fight against a boss when it's at the last 33% so you can move whilst you're doing Ignite or whatever the quick cast ability is. That's a Fire one. Arcane. Again, I want to like that, but I don't know if I do. I gave it a 3.25 out of 5 because I wasn't quite sure where I stood with it. I didn't want to put it down to 3 because I think it's interesting in the sense that it's different. Because Frost and Fire are basically the same spec. Arcane is actually at least different, but it's just slow and sort of not very flexible. But I appreciated the different playstyle. Could be better for raids, maybe, but because it's a bit static. So if you're in a boss fight where you're against a single target and you're just whacking away, you might enjoy it, but it's not really that. It's pretty simple. It's actually, it almost needs a bit more complexity. You won't be too satisfied, I don't think. So Mage is a good run-of-the-mill ranged spec because it does what it does with a class with all of its specs. But I don't think it's as good as it could be. So that's why most of my top classes are actually melee. Normally, I'm actually a range player. Notoriously, I've been more of a range player in World of Warcraft than I have a melee. If you exclude the fact that I spent most of my World of Warcraft playing Druid, Feral, or Guardian Druid. But generally speaking, I've been like Hunters, Mages, Warlocks in the past, far more often than I've been Rogues, Warriors, Monks. But this time round, I'm looking forward to the top 3. Particularly the top 2. Rogue would have been up there. I really liked Rogue. Really liked Rogue. Let's do Subtlety. Its cooldown dependency might not always be lining up, making it frustrating, but theoretically quite cool and interesting to manage. So it's kind of like Assassination. It's not as complicated as you think it would be to play, but it does have these 45-second, 1-minute cooldowns that do line up sometimes, but when they don't line up, you sometimes feel like you've got to wait for them to line up before you can start playing again. And again, I say I don't like dependencies. I don't like moments where I've got to feel like I have to stop or, you know, wait. I don't like that. I always want to be going. Outlaw, I hated this spec to begin with. Hated it. Dog shit. So that's some of the old text from when I first played it at level 40. Far too clunky and requires too much setup with irritating cooldown on between the eyes and roll the bones, making it less impactful but quicker. So basically, my impression of Outlaw is it could be a 5 out of 5. If they made the in between the eyes like a 30-second cooldown instead of a 45-second cooldown, and made roll the bones like 25 seconds instead of 45 seconds. All you do is you just basically reduce the cooldown of those two abilities, but also reduce their effects. So it balances out. I always prefer having quicker cooldowns that I can sort of be rotating meaningfully than waiting for big damage. I hate that so much. I think it's so boring. I think it's more orientated towards those boss rush phases or PvP where you can only kill people within a certain time window. I just don't think it's that fun having to wait for that time window. But generally speaking, Outlaw is pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. It's not as bad as I originally thought. Could get better with haste, so I can hit more often, so I can reduce the cooldown of in between the eyes with my eviscerate, etc., or dispatch, which is what it was actually called. Assassination. I really liked this, but this is the main reason why I probably won't play Rogue, is because it was my favorite spec out of those 3, but it's kind of the most redundant spec. It would make it higher if better single target DPS or wasn't so dependent on 3 high health targets. Basically, if you're hitting one target, Assassination's so simple and there's not much to it and there's not much reward that it's just kind of boring to play, and you know you could do more when you're playing it. But if you're in those situations where you've got like 3 targets that all have high health and they're not going to die within 5 seconds, regardless of how hard your people in your party are trying to kill them, you can have a fucking blast, because you are, it's all, the mechanic of Assassination is so cool. You do bleed damage over time to regenerate energy. More energy equals doing more things, hitting more abilities, hitting more damage. So you maintain Garrot on 3 separate targets, making sure it's always ticking, and Rupture on 3 separate targets. There's a really high skill ceiling to that potentially, but you have to always basically have these 3 targets to actually enjoy the class, at least how I felt. If I didn't have those 3 units that were up that I could hit for a long time, I felt like, oh, I'm only maintaining Garrot and Rupture on 1 target. Okay, now I've got 20 seconds to just keep using Eviscerate on it instead, because there's literally no other thing to do. Slice and Dice is active, Rupture's active, Garrot's active. there's not anything else to it other than just hitting 2 and 3. Like, what the hell? It could be so much better. Obviously, Rogue also gets a big boost because it can stealth, so really good for flexibility. Now, let's go on to Warrior. Now, really, I am at the point where I still haven't decided which class I want to play, and we are like 1 day away from Shadowlands coming out. It's either Monk or it's Warrior. I think I'm edging towards Monk ever so slightly more, and I'll explain the difference between the two. But they are both fantastic classes. If you're playing melee and you don't want to stealth, these two are hands down the best, in my opinion. Hands down. So let's look at Warrior. Let's begin with Arms, for example. The abilities are fairly solid from a Warrior perspective. They are what you would expect to be big, hard-hitting abilities, but they've got long cooldowns, which kills the vibe. So similar to like Retribution Paladin, in the sense that you've got this downtime. You feel like you've got a lot of downtime as you're waiting for Colossus Smash to become available. You can reduce it, but the really punishing thing about Arms is because of how fun Fury is to play. Fury, right, it has like Whirlwind. You don't really use Slam, but you use Whirlwind. It doesn't cost rage, it generates rage. Not much, but generates it. In Arms, it costs you 30 rage to Whirlwind, 20 rage to Slam, so you're being punished for trying to generate or use filler abilities. So there's these moments where you're down to 0 rage, and you can't use Overpower, you can't use Mortal Strike, Colossus Smash is on cooldown. It's like, what is going on? Like, why? Why are you punishing me? If it played like Fury in the sense that Slam didn't actually cost rage, it actually generated rage, it would be way better to play. So Fury, really do not like the enrage mechanic though. I feel like the enrage mechanic is fundamentally redundant, because what it does, I mean, it should be inbuilt or passive, right? It's this thing that you're kind of dependent on to use an ability called Onslaught, which is a talent, so you don't have to pick it, and I suggest you don't pick it because it's really frustrating, because you have to have it in rage available to use Onslaught, and Onslaught is like a 10-second cooldown, and when this 10-second cooldown is available, you might want to hit it, but then suddenly that's the moment where you don't have enrage. You have enrage like 70 to 80% of the time, almost all the time when you're fighting, so why you even have this thing? And it only lasts for like 4 seconds. But knowing your luck, when Onslaught is available, Enrage is going to be off, is not going to be available. So you have to wait that extra second or two. It really kills the vibe. I just don't like Enrage because it feels like the spec just plays. It would play fine if it didn't have any dependency on Enrage. It's hard to explain. Because if you don't use the Onslaught talent, you don't really notice Enrage dropping off for that 1 or 2 seconds and then being on most of the time. It only lasts for like 4 or 5 seconds. It drops off every 1 or 2 seconds every now and then. Otherwise, you're always basically got it. So it's just always there, but your other abilities don't care that much about it. It sounds like I'm coming down on this spec so hard, but I'm not, because that's my big problem. Otherwise, the rotation is very simple but really fun. It does everything you need it to do. I have 2 my Bloodlust, short cooldown, like 4.4 second cooldown, nice meaty hit, heals you. You got 3 your Raging Blow, you get 2 charges of those, so you can maintain, always keep it underneath 2 charges, something to do, builds big rage. Then when you get 80 rage, you spend on Rampage, big meaty hit, very satisfying, back to Bloodlust, and that is just fine. It's only a few abilities, but it's absolutely fine, because if you ever find those abilities not available, you've got Whirlwind, which you use as a filler, but it's satisfying because you only need to use it once every 5 to 10 seconds or something like that, because you've always got the other 2 free abilities pretty much always available, so you just got something that you can use to fill in the gaps. And there's also Anger Management, only a 1.5 minute cooldown, but you can actually get a talent that reduces the cooldown when you use Rage, so I love that. Hunter also had that with True Shot. If you're actively playing, you can actually play the class. So you play the class, you use the spells, you use the abilities, and it rewards you by reducing the cooldown on the ability that makes you even more powerful. So it is fantastic to play Fury. Really good. And I love how it also has like an AoE mechanic to make it more interesting, because otherwise you would only use Whirlwind. But what you do is you use Whirlwind, which empowers your next 2 melee abilities to do 45% damage to every target, or 5 targets. So you use Whirlwind, then you sort of want to line it up so you can use Whirlwind, then like a Rampage, something that's going to hit hard, and a Bloodlust, and then a Whirlwind again. And there's that kind of like flow, so it makes it more interesting. Out in the world, this is one of the most fun classes and specs to play, because mobs die quickly. You charge, you heroic leap, you kill them, you get health back with Victory Rush, because you just move on to the next target, use a Victory Rush, get your, you know, your jolt of health. You blast them down with Bloodlust, Raging, Rampage, and then Execute. I forgot about Execute. Oh, Execute is so satisfying. And again, you get to use it all the time out in the world, because you're always killing mobs quickly. So satisfying. Like, it's a really freaking good class to play. I highly recommend it. The only downside to Fury is where it falls down for me is if I was doing Raiding or Mythic Plus or something like that, particularly Raiding, I suppose, and I was doing a DPS rotation, I think I would get a bit more bored of it, because there's not really that much to the single target. If you're killing mobs quickly, it's much more interesting, but if you're fighting against a mob that just doesn't die, it suddenly falls behind there. Protection, 5 out of 5 as well. Don't talent into Devastator, because it removes basically your spam filler. And if you don't do that, you're going to have a really good time, because you've got your filler, you've got your shield slam to use, as well as when it procs. You've got revenge to use on AoE, as well as when it procs. You've got thunderclap every 4 seconds to use, because it keeps mobs under control. Demoralizing shout is a good burst to keep mobs under control. You got shockwave as well. You got like a shield block to reduce damage taken or ignore pain, so there's damage mitigation there. You got the movement with a heroic leap, with charge. I mean, this is a fantastic class to play. The only place where it falls down is its ability to say spam AoE. I think it might not necessarily have as good a job as Druid in terms of the range of swipe and thrash, damage over time AoE, but it is really fucking fun to play Protection. It's a little bit hard to manage though when you've got too many mobs. I feel like it's almost a bit too stressful, because you can't concentrate on doing your rotation as efficiently unless you're an absolute pro. You're gonna miss out on not doing things as well as you should be doing. When the shit hits the fan, it becomes much harder to play. Moving on to Monk. Basically my top class. Let's do Healer. Surprisingly good. Lacks AoE healing though, but you can actually get a talent to improve AoE healing, but mobs need to, or rather people need to be closer to you. I thought this would be 8 minutes. I know it's not going to be 8 minutes. I talk too much, and that's when I'm trying to talk quickly. Doing damage on side is quite annoying. So the thing I really don't like about Monk healing so much is this kind of dependency to do damage. I like doing damage as a healer, but that's as like a priest healer or a shaman, because I can do range damage. I can step back from the fight, see what's happening, see my allies, target the mob, do some damage, and then easily target my allies. If I'm in melee range, I can't easily target my ally. I know you got like raid frames and stuff like that, but it's a bit, it doesn't feel as good. So that's a big downside, is having to sort of, you don't have to melee, but if you're trying to be effective, then you kind of should do it. Otherwise, their healing is actually really good. They got like lots of AoE healing, or not lots of AoE healing, sorry. Their single target healing is really good. They got heal over time. They got a big heal that increases the amount of healing that they do as well in general to that target, which I'm not a big fan of, because it's similar to the Beacon of Light thing, but it is what it is. But they got quick heal, and their Soothing Mist thing is really interesting, because it's like a channeled ability, but you'd think that you channel this heal over time, and then you go to cast another ability, and you're going to interrupt that channel, so it kind of makes it redundant, but it doesn't, because it doesn't interrupt the channel. In fact, the channel keeps on going, and in any two of these abilities that you use, your quick heal or your big heal, they're instant when you're using Soothing on that target, and you can use a statue to also heal that target. I think I'll knock it down to 4 out of 5, because I think it is very good, but I don't think it's as good as necessarily the Shaman. I know 4.25 does put it slightly lower. It is basically like, let's go 4.15 out of 5. And then last but not least, oh no, wait, we've got a Brewmaster to do. So Brewmaster, I didn't like it that much the first time I played it, but playing it again at level 50, you get another ability that gives you just that extra AoE that you kind of felt like you was missing, because you were only using spinning crane kick. You got this ability that can, or it's a talent rather, which is an ability that can sort of do damage around you, a bit like Consecration, and you just need to maintain that. Very easy to do. I actually found Brewmaster really easy to play this time around. I think the first time I played it, I just didn't know what the heck was going on, but this time around, I actually found it was actually really easy, and because it was so easy, it was actually easier to concentrate on actually tanking. That's where the warrior falls down a bit, right? I think the warrior is more complex and definitely more rewarding of a higher score than Brewmaster is. But like I say, when the shit hits the fan or things get too messy, Brewmaster is better because it's so much easier to manage what's going on. It's like, oh, there's a shit ton of mobs. Okay, hit the AoE, hit the spinning crane kick, put the ox down, taunt the ox, because you got this ox that you can put down on the ground, and then all the mobs, it's got like an AoE taunt, which is fucking sick. Like, not many classes have that anymore. So, really good control. Single target, you just spam your Tiger Palm, you spam your Blackout Kick, you can't really go too far wrong. Good filler. And they've also got this sort of interesting in-between filler, which can be used for single target and for AoE, which is the Keg Smash and the Brewmaster Fire. So that's like an AoE, but you still do it on single target. So you've got that every 5 to 10, 15 seconds. I just think Brewmaster is actually a lot better this time round playing it. So I could be happy playing it as a tank if I had to. I don't plan on playing tank. I don't plan on playing healer. But if I had to, I would be happy doing Brewmaster, tanking or healer. The stagger mechanic, I don't think is actually... has it been made easier? I thought when I initially went into it, I was quite confused by it. Halgarius, thank you very much for the sub. But it's actually really not hard. Stagger, it's just a weird little mechanic that you have to sort of handle, but it's not a big deal. You just basically activate this ability that reduces it by half, and you get 2 charges of that. It's on a pretty short cooldown. You just make sure that's always basically ticking up to the 2nd charge, and then using one of those actually amplifies the shield that you can put on yourself, which is cool because it's like an interesting mechanic. It's not hard, stagger. I think the most annoying thing about it is like the debuff lines that you have on the side of your character. Now, Windwalker has great potential, action-packed but tough. Probably you want weak auras to get the most out of this. So I wrote that a long time ago, and I've played Windwalker since quite a lot. I really like the rotation of Windwalker. I think it's more fulfilling than Fury is. Fury is fantastic for when you're out in the world killing mobs quicker, but if you're on a mob that's going to last longer than like 15 to 20 seconds, Windwalker is much more enjoyable than Fury. And you've got your filler ability, you've got your spenders, that reduce the abilities on those big spenders, so your Rising Sun Kick are your big spenders, your Fist of Fury is your big spenders, and then if you've got those 2 on cooldown, you can use a really big ability, which is good for single target and AoE, the Rising Sun, the Whirling Dragon Kick. And I normally don't like that because it's like a dependency on 2 abilities having to be off cooldown, but it's not that hard to pull off, so it doesn't bother me that much. They've got 2 DPS cooldowns, Suin, Set It, Forget It, and the Stormer Fire. But because they're kind of shortish cooldowns, you've got 2 charges up to 1.5 minutes on the Stormer Fire. It doesn't bother me that much. They got good AoE because you can charge up your AoE by using a good rotation. That's the other thing that makes them interesting, right? So they've got a Mastery, which rewards you, albeit not by much, only like 10% damage at least from what I saw. But it still rewards you for not hitting the same ability twice. So you're constantly thinking in your head what to do. It's not particularly hard to maintain, but it's still a little extra bit of a reward to separate you from a shit monk. Do you see what I mean? So you can separate yourself and elevate yourself. It gives you that potential to rise up and be more powerful than someone else if you can use the skill to do it. They're great. They got good maneuverability. And the other thing I think that puts Windwalker up there for me is the fact that they can heal themselves. The thing I really don't like about Fury Warrior is if I'm in a raiding situation, or like when you're farming these rares in Ice Crown, if I get low on health, I'm fucked. I got Bloodlust. But that's it. I can't heal myself. I'm taking damage over time from these boss abilities. No one else is healing me. I literally just have to die a bunch of times when I'm doing it on my warrior. But when I'm on my monk, you're in trouble. You can slow the mob down, or you can just whirlwind out of there and heal yourself up, because your heal only costs energy. And then boom, you go back into the fight. I think that's going to be more flexible than the warrior is for Torghast. So I probably, now thinking about it, going to play monk first, but I'm definitely going to level up all the other classes. But monk and warrior are my two favorites. So it really comes down to which one of these classes plays best in Torghast, I think, because that's the main content for me. But I think monk is going to give me more flexibility for controlling mobs. Oh, Crackling Jade Lightning. Fuck me. I did not like this ability at first, but it's really good once you get the hang of it. You want to be careful, because it's got a really quick cooldown on it. So the global cooldown's quicker on it, so you can use it more frequently to aggro a whole bunch of mobs. It's got 40-yard range, and there's a sort of skill to it where you use it, but you almost leave a mini delay before activating it again, so you don't interrupt the initial aggro that you're going to get from it. And when you get the hang of it, you can pull a shit ton of mobs. It's really good for out in the world, where the warrior suffers a little bit there for trying to pull mobs from someone else that's going to get the tag, for example. Whereas monk, sorry, you just Crackling Jade Lightning everything. You have a good time. I'm running out of breath here because of all the talking. Yeah, that's basically it. Monk's got, like, you can debuff yourself as well, or detox yourself. They just seem to have a little bit more flexibility than warrior, which is, if warrior could heal itself, it would be ridiculously close between. You could just play either one. Honestly, Fury is fantastic. Monk is just, it's got to be the monk, I think, because it also gives me a healing opportunity and tanking if I ever wanted that. Alright, so to sum it up, this is the order. Paladin bottom, Druid, Warlock, Hunter, Demon Hunter, Death Knight, Priest, Shaman, Mage, Rogue, Warrior, Monk. I stand by that personally. I've explained everything as best as I can. My thoughts, my reasons, why, how. It's all there. If you enjoyed this, make sure to thumbs up the video. Hopefully this helps you also pick a class that you're looking for. If you have come across this video, make sure to thumbs up. It does help. And let me know what class you're going to play. Which class do you think is better? Perhaps you prefer warrior over monk. Maybe there's more reason to play it for you. Don't take it too personally if one of your classes seems to be at the bottom. This is my personal thoughts and reasons, and I have a different play style to yourself most likely when it comes to that, which is why you might differ. Eploa says he will definitely try out Rogue because of me. If you don't mind the stealth, then Rogue is very good, obviously, because of the stealth. But the problem I have with Rogue in that sense is you're not getting the benefit of it when you're in a dungeon so much, because you've got to keep going into stealth to get like a big damage on your next hit. You don't have to, but the other classes, retail is just fast. I think if you're playing TBC, like in TBC, I might end up playing Rogue, for example, because mobs just take longer to kill. There's more length to the fights, so I feel like Rogue would be more rewarded. But I think in retail, it's just so fast and action-packed. You're just moving from mob to mob, which is where monk and warrior are quicker, faster, and they don't need to enter stealth. They don't need those mechanics. They can just pull the mob and destroy it within seconds and then move on to the next one. So, yeah. I'm going to start off leveling my monk. As for Shadowlands content, I don't know how much of it I'm putting up on the YouTube channel, but I will be streaming it, twitch.tv/wtiii. I don't know if I'm going to be streaming at midnight or just waiting the next day and then playing a long time. I do plan to play a lot of it. How much of it I'm going to stream, I don't know. I mean, I've only just got to this point. We are like one day away, and I've only just got everything ready to the point where I feel like I can decide what class I'm going to play. So yeah, I went a long time here. I didn't mean to spend this long talking, but it took me longer. But the main thing for me, really, probably with World of Warcraft Shadowlands, is Torghast. So whichever class has the most fun, flexible time in Torghast, along with the abilities that you're going to unlock as you level through it, is probably going to be the class that I'm going to choose. And I think that's why I think Monk might edge over Warrior, unless Warrior can get so strong that it can heal itself. Because I'm worried about when you're fighting against a mob, and you know that mob's going to kill you, so you can't charge back into the fight. So then what do? You can't walk off and heal yourself. But Monk, you can. You just torpedo kick heal yourself a few times, then get back into the fight. That's where I stand. So I think Monk gives more flexibility. It gives the most flexibility. And it also has a really cool rotation, meaningful rotation along with that. So there you go. GG. Thanks. Take care. Enjoy Shadowlands. Have a good time.